Some professionals who work with assertiveness training prefer to add a fourth category, indirect aggression, to this model. Some professionals who work with assertiveness training prefer to add a fourth category, indirect aggression, to this model. They note that much aggressive behavior takes the form of passive, non-oppositional action. Sometimes such actions are sneaky or sly, other times they may simply be double entendres, smiling, friendly, agreeable behavior that hides a backstabbing or undermining action. We consider this category to be a form of aggression and have simplified our model by not dealing with it separately. Appropriately assertive behavior in the same situation would be self-enhancing for the sender, would be an honest expression of feelings, and would usually achieve the goal. When you choose for yourself how to act, a good feeling typically accompanies the assertive response, even when you don't achieve your goals. When the consequences of these three contrasting behaviors are seen from the viewpoint of the receiver of the action, we see a parallel pattern. Non-assertive behavior may produce sympathy, confusion, or outright contempt for the sender. Also, the receiver may feel guilt or anger at having achieved goals at the expense of the sender. The receiver of aggressive actions often feels hurt, defensive, put down, or perhaps aggressive in return. In contrast, assertion tends to enhance the feeling of self-worth of both parties and permits both full self-expression and achievement of needs. In summary, it is clear that self-denial in non-assertive behavior hurts the sender, aggressive behavior may hurt the receiver or even both parties. In the case of assertion, neither person is hurt, and it is likely that both will succeed. The series of example situations that appears in Chapter 6 will help to make these distinctions more clear. Assertive behavior is a positive self-affirmation that also values the other people in your life. It is important to note that assertive behavior is person and situation specific, not universal. What may be considered assertive depends upon the people involved and the circumstances of the situation. Although we believe the definitions and examples presented in this book are realistic and appropriate for most people and circumstances, individual differences must be considered. Cultural or ethnic background, for instance, may create a different set of personal circumstances that would change the nature of appropriateness in assertive behavior. Assertiveness and personal boundaries. There's lots of talk these days about boundaries. The concept of personal boundaries is a graphic way of describing how close you allow others to come to you, physically, emotionally, sexually, intellectually, and socially. Your sense of yourself provides the foundation for your creation of boundaries. It might appear that someone who has a strong self-concept would have solid boundaries, a virtual bubble in which one can walk at a safe distance from other people. We don't see it that way. In our view, a strong self-concept will enable you to allow others to get close to you because you're secure in yourself. Personal insecurity, a weak self-concept, may lead you to keep others at a distance, lest their closeness become a threat. The relationship between personal boundaries and assertiveness is strong but not necessarily simple. Assertive self-expression allows you to communicate your boundaries to others. That's as close as I'll allow you to get to me. Don't touch me. You're in my space now, please back off. But assertiveness is not all about setting limits or maintaining control in relationships. The equal relationship assertiveness we urge is about closeness as well. We want you to be able to act assertively in drawing people closer to you as well as in keeping them away, as you choose. Romantic relationships provide classic examples of how personal boundaries work. If Jill finds Jack attractive, she may approach him with an invitation to get together socially, expanding her personal boundaries in an effort to draw him closer. Jack may misinterpret Jill's invitation and conclude that he is at liberty to make sexual advances. Jill may consider such actions a boundary violation and push Jack away. How close is close enough? Effective personal boundaries are not set in stone. They're flexible, they vary with each person with whom you have a relationship, and they vary with time. Jill might have welcomed Jack's sexual advances at a later time. By invading her boundary too early, however, he has probably lost the opportunity to develop a longer-term relationship. Once again, choice is the bottom line here. Our goal in facilitating your growth in assertive self-expression is to free you to make those choices, to be close when you want and to maintain distance when you prefer that, to nurture your ties with friends and loved ones and to set firm limits with those you don't want close, to speak up when it's necessary to defend your personal space and to reach out when you want to expand your personal space, and to recognize that the other person has rights too. As President Abraham Lincoln, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., and others pointed out more than a century ago, your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. Cultural differences in self-assertion. While the desire for self-expression may be a basic human need, assertive behavior in interpersonal relationships is primarily characteristic of Western cultures. For purposes of illustration, please permit us a few cultural generalizations and a stereotype or two. We discussed this topic in the previous chapter, but it's important enough to take another look as we consider what it means to be assertive. In many Asian and Middle Eastern cultures, group membership, family, clan, tribe, work group, religion is valued above individuality. How others see one tends to be more important to an individual than self-concept. Courtesy is a key virtue, and communication is often indirect so as to avoid confrontation or offending another. Those who value tradition generally do not consider assertiveness, in the Western sense of direct self-expression, appropriate. Many young people, however, and those whose activities include considerable contact with the United States and Europe have developed more direct, informal, and assertive styles. Many individuals and subcommunities in Latino and Hispanic societies have emphasized the notion of machismo, to the point that assertiveness, as we have defined it, seems rather tame, at least for men. In those cases, a greater display of strength is the norm for male self-expression. Yet people from cultures where self-assertion traditionally has not been valued may be just those who most need its benefits. As our world shrinks, it may be that current and future international relations require more open and direct communication and a greater sense of equality, expressed on both sides of the table. And it's not just culture. We hope our discussion of cultural differences doesn't make it seem that's all there is to diversity. Not so. Although culture is a very significant factor when it comes to assertive behavior, it's important not to overlook other dimensions of differentness. We're all different. Think about ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, physical abilities, mental abilities, socioeconomic status, education, religious beliefs. While it's not humanly possible to take all of these variables into account in assessing what it means to be assertive in any given situation, we urge you to make diversity a part of your frame of reference in your approach to relationships. But isn't aggression just human nature? Aggression and violence are often excused on the grounds that they are innate in the human organism and cannot be avoided. That's not the case, say the most distinguished scholars who have researched the subject. The Seville Statement, written in 1986 by 20 distinguished social and behavioral scientists from 12 nations and endorsed by the American Psychological and American Anthropological Associations, declares, "It is scientifically incorrect to say that we have inherited a tendency to make war from our animal ancestors. Warfare is a peculiarly human phenomenon and does not occur in other animals. War is biologically possible, but it is not inevitable. That war or any other violent behavior is genetically programmed into our human nature. Except for rare pathologies, the genes do not produce individuals necessarily predisposed to violence. Neither do they determine the opposite. That in the course of human evolution there has been a selection for aggressive behavior. Violence is neither in our evolutionary legacy nor in our genes. That humans have a violent brain. While we do have the neural apparatus to act violently, there is nothing in our neurophysiology that compels such behavior. That war is caused by instinct or any single motivation. We conclude that biology does not condemn humanity to war, and that humanity can be freed from the bondage of biological pessimism. The same species that invented war is capable of inventing peace. Classifying behavior arose by any other name. I told my father-in-law not to smoke his cigar in my house. Was that assertive or aggressive? Members of assertiveness training groups and workshops have often asked us to classify a particular act as assertive or aggressive. What makes the important difference? We've suggested that assertive and aggressive behavior differ principally in that the latter involves hurting, manipulating, or denying others in the course of expressing oneself. Practitioners and writers with a psychoanalytic orientation have proposed that intent must be considered. That is, if you intended to hurt your father-in-law, that's aggressive. If you simply wanted to inform him of your wishes, you were acting assertively from the viewpoint of intent. Many psychologists insist that behavior must be measurable according to its effects. Thus, if your father-in-law gets the assertive message and responds accordingly, by agreeing not to smoke, your behavior may be classified as assertive. If he pouts in a corner or shouts, "Who do you think you are?" your statement probably came across as aggressive. As we have noted, the sociocultural context must be taken into account in classifying behavior as assertive or aggressive or non-assertive. A culture that highly values honoring one's elders may view the request as clearly out of line and aggressive, regardless of the behavior, response, or intent. There are no absolutes in this area, and some criteria may be in conflict. A particular act may be at once assertive in behavior and intent. You wanted to and did express your feelings, aggressive in response, the other person could not handle your assertion, and non-assertive in the sociocultural context. Your culture expects a powerful, put-down style. It's not always easy to classify human behavior. A specific situation may vary considerably from the examples we discuss here. In any event, the question, is it assertive or aggressive, is not one that may be answered simply. Each situation ultimately must be evaluated on its own. The labels, non-assertive, assertive, and aggressive, themselves carry no magic, but they may be useful in assessing the appropriateness of a particular action. Bottom line, don't sweat the labels. We want you to be able to choose for yourself how you will act and to know that you have the tools you need to succeed. Social consequences of assertion. While you're learning skills to improve your ability to express yourself appropriately and responsibly, keep in mind that self-expression must be modulated by its context. Just as freedom of speech does not convey the right to yell, fire, in a crowded theater, so the form of self-expression we advise is one that considers its consequences. Once again, your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. The perfect right you have to say no exists alongside the other person's right to say yes. And your desire to accomplish your goals through self-assertion must be weighed against the needs of the larger society. Speak out or write about any idea you choose to support, but recognize the other person's right to do the same. And be prepared to pay some dues, perhaps in jail, if your expression goes beyond words and includes civil disobedience. Just as there are taxes for those who accumulate wealth, there is a price to pay for freedom of expression. While you have a perfect right to maintain a viewpoint, everyone else has the same right, and your views may conflict. Keep this in mind on your journey toward greater personal assertiveness. Be nice. What's the secret of good conversation? The CBS TV host asked our psychologist colleague and friend Bernardo Carducci. Be nice, Bernie replied. Can it be that simple? Perhaps. Dr. Carducci was invited to the show because he's well known for his systematic approach to making conversation. In his Shyness Clinic at Indiana University Southeast, Carducci teaches 5 key steps to help students reach out to others and make good conversation. For TV, of course, he compressed his system into a sound bite: be nice. Although we've spent much of the last 50 years helping folks express themselves more effectively, maybe we should have been paying more attention to niceness. Standing up for yourself, speaking out to right wrongs, expressing your wishes, feelings, and opinions, those are the important skills we've emphasized and called assertiveness. But as we think about what it means to be assertive, maybe we need to go further. Maybe more nice is what's needed these days. Consider courtesy, holding doors for others, not cutting in lines, asking rather than demanding, just being polite, being on time. If your hair isn't gray, hold a door open for someone whose is. Thanks. Expressing appreciation for small things, recognizing those who give of themselves. If a member of your service club or bridge group or band Expressing appreciation for small things, recognizing those who give of themselves. If a member of your service club or bridge group or band goes the extra mile, thank her publicly. Thoughtfulness, remembering others' needs, doing favors, giving compliments, listening, paying attention. If there's a birthday coming up for someone in your life, remember it in some small or large way. Honesty, being straight but not hurtful, expressing love and caring, keeping promises. If a loved one or friend has hurt you, find a time and place to bring it up, gently, and work it out. Balance, Give and take, quid pro quo. Civility. We don't hear much about it today, but believe it or not, it used to be the order of the day in Congress. Can we disagree without being disagreeable? Reaching out. Being the first to say hello or wave, cultivating friendly neighborhoods, connecting, making friends. Organizations, institutions, corporations, and even schools and colleges and hospitals often take advantage of people. The people in them don't matter. All that matters is that the institution itself continues on its path without interference. Even volunteer groups in the community frequently are careless about how they treat those who give so much to make life better for all of us. As individuals, we don't have to act like institutions. We can treat one another with respect, as people of unique worth. We can be nice. Assertiveness in the 21st century. In early editions of Your Perfect Right, we use the following example of a situation calling for assertive action. Has anyone ever cut in front of you in a line? Our advice, of course, was to speak up for yourself, to call attention to the situation, to ask that the line jumper respect the rights of those who have already been waiting. Today, frankly, we're not so sure. New York Times columnist and author Thomas L. Friedman, The World is Flat, tells of an incident in an airport bookshop a few years back that illustrates this point. Thinking he was next in line, he put his money on the counter and heard the woman next to him say, "Excuse me, I was here first." Obviously, this was someone in a hurry to make her purchase. Friedman said he was very sorry, but he was clearly there first. Today, he says, he would have responded very differently. I would have said, "Miss, I'm so sorry. I am entirely in the wrong. Please go ahead, and can I buy your magazines for you?" These days, Friedman muses, you never know how people will react. I'd be thinking there is some chance this woman has a blog, or a camera in her mobile phone, and could, if she so chose, tell the whole world about our encounter, entirely from her perspective, and my utterly rude, boorish, arrogant, thinks he can but inline behavior. Yikes. And if the other person in such an encounter were inclined to be directly aggressive, Friedman might have wound up with a bloody nose, or perhaps worse, in a time when weapons are commonly carried. We have emphasized the importance of individual self-expression, and we remain committed to the value of each individual human being. But let's be real about the world in which we find ourselves in the 21st century. We have long considered appropriate assertiveness to be person and situation specific. The cutting in line situation must be assessed more carefully. Our perfect rights haven't changed, of course, but we must exercise our right to express them with greater caution. It has always been true that you risk being punched in the nose when you speak up for yourself. Today, however, the probability of a violent reaction seems greater than ever before. A punch in the nose, an obscene gesture, even a knife or gun are seen as the quick answer to many disagreements. Cut me off on the freeway. The least you'll get is my horn and the extended digit of one hand. You may get bumped the next time traffic slows down, or I may just decide to run you off the road. Reprimand or fire me at work. I may return with a gun to pay you back if I'm emotionally unstable or under the influence. Law enforcement officials tell us that a huge percentage of convicted criminals are chronic drug users. There are, of course, no easy answers to such dilemmas of life in a violence-prone, post-9/11 society. We cannot recommend that you take the risks of asserting yourself under all circumstances, nor will we advise you to duck inside your shell and avoid any situation in which your safety may be at stake. What we do advise is that you exercise appropriate caution in risky situations. Take time to consider the possible consequences of your actions, how well you know the persons you're dealing with, how well you know the territory in which you find yourself, how important it is to have your say, whether you're likely to accomplish anything by speaking up. In Chapter 22, we elaborate on those thoughts and put together a checklist of criteria to aid you in deciding, is this a situation in which I want to be assertive? Don't misunderstand our caveat here. We do not want you to avoid reasonable assertions because there may be risk. There is risk in getting out of bed in the morning. There is risk in driving your car even without the crazies. There is risk in most jobs. Ask your employer about the cost of workers' compensation insurance, even for non-hazardous jobs. There is risk in living in the city or in the country. There is risk in involving yourself in a relationship. To avoid risk is to avoid life, and we want you to live as fully as you can. Just consider taking risks that count for something. Our society needs all the help it can get in creating harmony. Let's focus our assertiveness where it's meaningful, working toward equality and cooperation in relationships with others. 11 key points about assertive behavior. To summarize this chapter, here's a list of 11 key qualities of assertive behavior: self-expressive, respectful of the rights of others, honest, direct and firm, equalizing, benefiting both parties in a relationship, both verbal including the content of the message and nonverbal including the style of the message, positive, expressing affection, praise, appreciation at times, and negative, expressing limits, anger, criticism at times, appropriate for the person and situation, not universal, socially responsible, both inborn elements of temperament and learned styles of behavior, as persistent as is necessary to achieve one's goals without violating the 10 points above. Now you have a better idea of what it means to be assertive, and you're probably ready to begin taking steps toward increasing your own effectiveness in self-expression. The following chapter provides many examples of life situations calling for assertive action. It's likely you'll find yourself nodding in recognition as you read them. Chapter 6. Can you give me an example? We are all controlled by the world in which we live. The question is this: are we to be controlled by accidents, by tyrants, or by ourselves? B.F. Skinner. A look at some everyday situations will improve your understanding of the behavioral styles we've discussed. As you read the examples in this chapter, you may wish to pause and think about your own response before reading the alternative responses we have presented. These examples are oversimplified, of course, so we can demonstrate the ideas more clearly. Something borrowed. Yolanda is a flight attendant, bright, outgoing, a good worker, and liked by customers and peers. She lives in a condo with 2 roommates and is looking forward to a quiet evening at home one Friday when her roommate Marcy asks a favor. Marcy says that she is going out with a special man and wants to borrow Yolanda's new and quite expensive necklace. The necklace was a gift from her brother, with whom Yolanda is very close, and it means a great deal to her. Her response is non-assertive. She swallows her anxiety about loss or damage to the necklace. Although she feels that its special meaning makes it too personal to lend, she says, sure. She denies herself, rewards Marcy for making an unreasonable request, and worries all evening. Aggressive, Yolanda is outraged at her friend's request, tells her, absolutely not. And rebukes her severely for even daring to ask such a stupid question. She humiliates Marcy and makes a fool of herself too. Later she feels uncomfortable and guilty. Marcy's hurt feelings show all evening, and she has a miserable time, which puzzles and dismays her date. Thereafter, the relationship between Yolanda and Marcy is very strained. Assertive, Yolanda explains the significance of the necklace to her roommate. Kindly but firmly, she tells Marcy she can't agree to her request because this piece of jewelry is particularly personal. Marcy is disappointed but understanding, and Yolanda feels good for having been honest. Marcy impresses her date just by being herself. Dining out. Akeem and Letitia are at dinner in a moderately expensive restaurant. Akeem has ordered grilled chicken breast, but when the entree is served, he finds it overcooked and dry. His action is non-assertive. Akeem grumbles to Letitia about the burned meat and vows that he won't patronize this restaurant in the future. He says nothing to the server about his disappointment, instead responding, fine. To her inquiry, is everything all right? His dinner and evening are spoiled, and he feels angry with himself for taking no action. Akeem's estimation of himself and Letitia's estimation of him are both deflated by the experience. Aggressive, Akeem angrily summons the server to his table. He criticizes her loudly and unfairly for not complying with his order. His actions ridicule the server and embarrass Letitia. He demands and receives another dinner, prepared more to his liking. He feels in control of the situation, but Letitia's embarrassment creates friction between them and spoils their night out. The server is humiliated and angry for the rest of the evening. Assertive, Akeem motions the server to his table. He shows her the overcooked meat and asks in a friendly way that it be returned to the kitchen and replaced. The server apologizes for the error and shortly returns with a properly cooked order of chicken. Akeem and Letitia enjoy dinner, and Akeem feels satisfaction with himself. The server is pleased with a satisfied customer and a generous tip. Have a snort. Lindsay is a friendly, socially active graduate student who has been going out with Justin and has come to care a lot for him. One evening, he invites her to attend a small get-together with 2 other couples. As everyone gets acquainted at the party, Lindsay is enjoying herself. After an hour or so, one of her new friends brings out a small bag of cocaine. Everyone except Lindsay responds eagerly. She has not tried coke and doesn't want to experiment. She is in real conflict when Justin offers her a snort. She decides to be non-assertive. She accepts the cocaine and pretends to have used it before. She carefully watches the others to see how they inhale the powder. She dreads the possibility they may ask her to take more. Lindsay is worried about what Justin is thinking about her. She has denied her feelings, been dishonest with him, and feels remorseful for giving into something she did not wish to do. Aggressive, Lindsay is visibly upset when offered the cocaine and blasts Justin for bringing her to a party like this. She demands he take her home right away. When the others say she doesn't have to use if she doesn't want to, she yells at them. As she carries on, Justin is humiliated and embarrassed in front of his friends. He remains cordial to Lindsay as he takes her home, but he badmouths her to his friends the next day. Assertive, Lindsay does not accept the cocaine, replying simply, no, I don't want it, and asks Justin to take her home. On the way, she makes clear to him her concern that he didn't tell her in advance that there would be cocaine at the party. She emphasizes that she was really afraid that the party might have been busted. She tells Justin that she values their relationship, but she'll break it off if he continues to use drugs. The heavyweight. Dominic and Gina's marriage of 9 years is in trouble. Dominic is hassling Gina about being overweight. He brings the subject up continually, pointing out that she is no longer the woman he married, she was 25 pounds lighter then. He keeps telling her that being overweight is bad for her health, that she's a bad example for the children, and so on. Dominic teases Gina about being chunky, comments on how attractive thinner women look, and makes reference to her figure in front of their friends. She has been attempting to lose weight, with little success. Dominic has been acting this way for several months, and Gina is highly upset. Her response is non-assertive. She apologizes for her weight, makes feeble excuses, and simply doesn't reply to some of Dominic's comments. Internally, she feels both hostile toward her husband for his nagging and guilty about being overweight. Her feelings of anxiety make it even more difficult for her to lose weight, and the battle continues. Aggressive, Gina goes into a long tirade about how her husband isn't any great bargain anymore either. She brings up the fact that, at night, he falls asleep on the couch half the time, is a lousy sex partner, and doesn't pay enough attention to her. She complains that he humiliates her in front of the children and their close friends and that he acts like a lecherous old man by the way he eyes other women. In her anger, she succeeds only in wounding Dominic and driving a wedge between them. Assertive, approaching her husband when they're alone and will not be interrupted, Gina admits that Dominic is right about her need to lose weight, but she doesn't like the way he keeps after her about the problem. She points out that she is doing her best and is having a difficult time losing the weight and maintaining the loss. He admits that his harping is ineffective, and they work out a plan to exercise together. Dominic also resolves to reinforce her systematically for her efforts to lose weight. Volume uncontrolled. Edmund and Virginia have a 2-year-old boy and a baby girl. Over the last several nights, their neighbor's son, 17, has been sitting in his car in his own driveway with his car stereo blaring loudly. He begins just about the time their 2 young children go to bed on the side of the house closest to the music. They've found it virtually impossible to get the children to sleep until the music stops. Edmund and Virginia are both disturbed and decide to be non-assertive. They move the children into their own bedroom on the other side of the house, wait until the noise stops around midnight and then transfer the children back to their own rooms. Then they go to bed much past their own usual bedtime. They quietly curse the teenager and soon become alienated from their neighbors. Aggressive, they call the police and protest that one of those wild teenagers next door is creating a disturbance. They demand that the police put a stop to the noise at once. The police do talk with the boy and his parents, who get very angry as a result of their embarrassment about the police visit. They denounce Edmund and Virginia for reporting to the police without speaking to them first and resolve to have nothing further to do with them. Assertive. Edmund goes over to the boy's house early one evening and tells him that his stereo is keeping the children awake at night. Edmund suggests they try to work out an arrangement that allows the boy his music but does not disturb the children's sleep. The boy reluctantly agrees to set a lower volume during the late hours, but he appreciates Edmund's cooperative attitude. Both parties feel good about the outcome and agree to follow up a week later to be sure it is working as agreed. The loser. Chong is a 22-year-old college dropout who works as a computer game developer. He lives alone in a converted loft not far from his workplace. Chong has had no dates for the past 14 months. He left college after a series of depressing events, academic failures, rejection by a girlfriend, and some painful harassment by other students in his residence hall. He has been in jail overnight for drunkenness on 2 recent occasions. Yesterday, Chong received a letter from his mother inquiring about his well-being but primarily devoted to a discussion of his brother's recent successes. Today, his supervisor criticized him harshly for a mistake that was actually the supervisor's own fault. A coworker he admires turned down his invitation to dinner. When he arrived at his apartment that evening, feeling particularly depressed, his landlord met him at the door with a tirade about drunken bums and a demand that he pay this month's rent on time. Chang's response is non-assertive. He takes the burden of the landlord's attack upon himself, feeling added guilt and even greater depression. A sense of helplessness overcomes him. He wonders how his brother can be so successful while he considers himself a nothing. The coworker's rejection and the boss's criticism strengthen his opinion that he is worthless. He decides he really has nothing to live for and begins to think about how he might commit suicide. Aggressive. The landlord has added the final straw to Chang's burden. He becomes extremely angry and pushes the landlord out of the way in order to get into his room. Once alone, he resolves to get the people who have been making his life so miserable recently: the supervisor, the coworker, the landlord, whoever. He remembers the guns he saw in the pawnshop window yesterday. Assertive. Chong responds firmly to the landlord, noting that he has paid his rent regularly and that it is not due for another week. He reminds the landlord of a broken rail on the stairway and the plumbing repairs that were to have been accomplished weeks earlier. The following morning, after giving his life situation a great deal of thought, Chong calls the local mental health clinic to ask for help. At work, he approaches the supervisor privately and calmly explains the circumstances surrounding the mistake. Though somewhat defensive, the supervisor acknowledges her error and apologizes for her aggressive behavior. Recognizing your own non-assertive and aggressive behavior. The examples given in this chapter help to point out what assertiveness means in everyday events. Perhaps some of the situations rang a bell in your own life. Take a few minutes to listen honestly to yourself. Describe your relationships with others who are important to you. Carefully examine your contacts with parents, peers, coworkers, romantic partners, classmates, children, bosses, teachers, salespeople, neighbors, and relatives. Is one of you usually in charge in these relationships? Are you easily taken advantage of in dealings with others? Do you usually express your feelings and ideas openly? Do you take advantage of or hurt others frequently? Can you get your needs met and still be kind? Your responses to such questions provide hints that may lead you to explore in greater depth your assertive, non-assertive, or aggressive behavior. If you did not complete the assertiveness inventory in Chapter 2, we urge you to do so now. We think you'll find such a self-examination a rewarding and very important step toward increasing your interpersonal effectiveness. Part 3. Be Becoming Assertive. Chapter 7. Set goals for yourself. Never play another person's game. Play your own. Andrew Salter. A professor we admired used to tell his graduate students that changing yourself is like planning a trip. You have to find out where you are now, decide where you want to go, then figure out how to get there from here. Much of the material in this book so far has been devoted to helping you find out where you are now in relation to assertiveness. In the following chapters, we'll be focusing on ways to get there. This chapter is the bridge to help you decide where you're headed. Identifying your needs and setting your goals may be the most important and most difficult steps of all. How do I know what I want or need? Assertiveness. Assertiveness training evolved out of the idea that people live better lives if they can express what they want or need, if they can let others know how they would like to be treated. Some folks, however, find it hard to know what they really want from a relationship. If you have spent most of your life doing for others and believing that your needs are not important, it can be quite a chore to get a handle on just what is important to you. Some people do seem to know exactly how they feel and what they want. If a neighbor's dog is barking loudly, the feeling aroused in them may be annoyance or anger or fear. These folks are able to translate the feeling, get to the key issue at hand, and make the needed assertions, if any. Others find it difficult to know what their feelings are and what they want to accomplish in an encounter. They often hesitate to be assertive, lamenting, assert what? I don't know what I want. If you have such trouble, you may find it valuable to try to label your feelings. There are dozens of feelings we humans experience, of course. Anger, anxiety, boredom, discomfort, and fear are common ones. A few more that show up frequently are happiness, irritation, love, relaxation, and sadness. Some of us need an active first step to get in touch with our feelings. When you don't recognize what you're feeling or what you need in a situation, it often helps to say something to the people involved. I'm upset, but I'm not sure why. Or perhaps, I'm feeling depressed, or, something feels wrong, but I can't put my finger on it. Such a statement will start you on an active search for the feeling you're sensing and will help you begin to clarify your needs and goals. Perhaps it is a fear of some sort that is preventing you from recognizing your feelings, a type of protective mechanism. Or you may just be so far out of touch with your feelings that you have virtually forgotten what they mean. Don't get bogged down at this stage. Go ahead and try to express yourself. You will probably become aware of your goal even as you proceed. Indeed, maybe all you wanted was to say something. If you do begin to recognize the underlying feeling and decide to change directions midstream, I started out angry but realized that what I really wanted was attention. That is a constructive step. You can go a long way toward clarifying your feelings in a specific situation by identifying your general life goals. Assertiveness does need direction. While it seems to be a good idea in general, it is of little value for its own sake. Hello, needs. It's me, Tim ID. Ignoring their needs is one of the many ways people fail to care for themselves. Pleasing others and denying themselves are common choices for such individuals. Maybe you're one of them. Most are not consciously aware of their needs, so they find it difficult to express them in relationships. One of the earliest serious examinations of needs was that done by psychologist Abraham Maslow. If you've had a course in general psychology, you've probably come across Dr. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, usually depicted in the form of a pyramid consisting of multiple layers, with basic physiological needs as the foundation, then build up in turn through the needs for safety, belongingness and love, esteem, and self-actualization. An excellent contemporary resource for helping us to identify our needs is the work of Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, who has noted several categories of human needs in his book Nonviolent Communication. Among them are autonomy, choosing your goals, values, and plans, integrity, meaning, self-worth, interdependence, acceptance, closeness, warmth, community, play, fun, laughter, spiritual communion, beauty, harmony, peace, and physical nurturance, air, food, shelter. As you consider and discover your needs that are not being met in a relationship or life situation, it becomes easier to know how to handle it. If a relationship is not providing you the warmth you need, you can decide how to ask for it assertively. If your neighbor's amplified music or barking dog is denying your needs for rest and peace, you can assertively explain that to the neighbor rather than just complaining about the noise. Barking dog is denying your needs for rest and peace, you can assertively explain that to the neighbor rather than just complaining about the noise. You'll find at times that your needs may be in conflict. You may wish, for example, to keep a friendly relationship with your neighbor but also wish to quiet his noisy dog. If you confront him about the dog, you may risk the good relationship. At such a point, clarification of your own needs and goals, which ones are most important to you, will help you decide what to do and how to do it. A behavioral model for personal growth. Dr. Carl Rogers is recognized as the most influential psychological thinker of the second half of the 20th century. His ideas were the major influence in the development of what's known as the human potential movement. The list on the following 2 pages was prepared in the early 1970s in an attempt to translate Rogers' ideas into specific behaviors that could be carried out. We think you'll find it helpful, as you consider goals for your own growth, to read and ponder this behavioral model for personal growth. Structuring your goals. Okay, let's get specific. You want to write in your journal. You are keeping a journal, right? A few goals that will help guide your work on assertiveness in the weeks to come. Start by thinking creatively about what you want to get out of this program of personal growth. Brainstorm about your assertiveness, writing down anything that comes to mind. Write quickly. Don't ignore or criticize any idea, no matter how silly it may seem. Be as open-minded as you can. After you have compiled a list of possibilities, you'll need to pare it down to a short list of specific goals. What should go on that list? Consider 6 key criteria as you decide: personal factors, ideals, feasibility, flexibility, time, and priorities. Make each of your own goals qualify in terms of those 6 criteria. Personal factors. As you evaluate your specific goals for assertive growth, use your discoveries about yourself from the assertiveness inventory in Chapter 2 in your journal entries. In Chapter 3, Keep Track of Your Growth, we suggested that you keep track of your assertiveness using 5 categories. Situations that are difficult or easy for you. Key people in your life. Your attitudes, thoughts, and beliefs. Your behavior, the skills you possess relating to assertiveness, such as eye contact, voice volume, and gestures. More about these in the next chapter. Obstacles to your assertiveness, such as certain people or fears. Spend some time now reviewing your journal, looking for ideas that will help you to define goals for yourself. Spend some time now reviewing your journal, looking for ideas that will help you to define goals for yourself. You may, for example, find a pattern of difficulty dealing with a coworker who is pushy. Maybe she insists on doing things her way, doesn't listen to your ideas, and ignores your good suggestions. Your response may be to withdraw, avoiding confrontation by swallowing your disagreement and keeping quiet. You may also be wasting time and energy as you look for ways to stay clear of her and work on your own. Could an assertive approach help you here? Ideals. There are probably many people you admire. If you select the qualities of one or more models of assertiveness as ideals toward which you can strive, you'll have some specific behavioral goals already in mind. A well-chosen ideal will inspire you to stick to your goals. A good model may be a best friend, a beloved teacher, a public figure, a community leader, an entertainer or actor, a family member, a clergy person, a business executive, or someone of historical importance. This person's behavior can be one basis for your goals. You can go a long way toward clarifying your feelings in a specific situation by identifying your general life goals. Focus on the qualities that you want to attain, such as self-confidence, courage, persistence, and honesty. Measure your behavior against the model you have chosen. Think often about the person. Let your reflection on your model's behavior give you energy to keep at your own process of improvement in assertiveness. Feasibility. As we have suggested at various points in Your Perfect Right, go after your changes in assertive behavior slowly and in small steps to increase your chances of success. Don't set your goals too high and risk early failure. Instead, do a little each day, advancing step by step. Author-philosopher Morton Hunt illustrates this advice in a poignant way. He tells the story of how he learned to cope with major life stresses through a harrowing experience at age 8. Hunt and several friends climbed a cliff near his home. Halfway up, he got very scared and could go no farther. He was caught. To think of going either up or down overwhelmed him. The others left him behind as darkness approached. Eventually, his father came to the rescue, but Morton had to do the work. His father talked him down, establishing a pattern for him to overcome future fearfulness. The advice was timeless. Take one step at a time, go inch by inch, don't worry about what comes next, don't look way ahead. Later in life, when faced with major fearful events, Hunt remembered those simple lessons. Don't look at the dire consequences, start with the first small step, and let that small success provide the courage to take another and another. The small step goals will add up until the major goal is accomplished. The suggestions Hunt's father gave form an excellent approach to growth and assertiveness. Remind yourself to break your major goals into small, manageable steps. Take your time, the end will be in sight soon. You'll notice changes in yourself. You'll reach your goals, one step at a time. Flexibility. Deciding whether and how you'd like to change can be a complex and never-ending process. Goals are never set, they constantly change as you and your life circumstances change. Maybe at one time you wanted to finish school, and when you did, a whole new range of possibilities suddenly opened up. Or perhaps you sought to make $50,000 a year, and by the time you reached that level, you needed $100,000. Then there was that promotion. When you got it, you found you didn't like your new responsibilities as well as your old. So change itself is the constant factor. Keep your goals flexible enough that you can adapt to the inevitable changes that will come in your life. Time. How about listing your goals according to how long it will take to accomplish them? Here are some examples of assertiveness goals. Long-range goals. Behave more assertively with my spouse, take more risks in my life. Reduce my anxiety about behaving assertively, overcome my fear of conflict and anger. 1-year goals. Compliment those close to me more frequently, speak out in front of groups more often, say no and stick to it. Improve my eye contact in conversation. Not say, I'm sorry, or, I hate to bother you, so much. 1-month goals. Return the faulty vacuum cleaner to the store. Say no to the finder of committee members at work. Express my love for my spouse in some way every day, invite my new neighbor over for coffee. Start listening to recorded seminars, online or on CDs, about speaking out, customize these lists to your own unique needs, the possibilities are virtually limitless. Priorities. After determining and grouping your short-range, mid-range, and long-range goals, further sort each one by priority, identifying each goal as top drawer, middle drawer, or bottom drawer. Accordingly, top drawer goals are those that are most important. Middle drawer goals are those that are important but don't need to be accomplished right away. Bottom drawer goals can be put off indefinitely without causing great stress. Here's a sample of what your priority chart could look like. If you select 2 top drawer goals from each of the 3 lists, you'll have 6 top priority items to work on or start working on during a period of 1 month. Each month you can select a new list. Some goals will stay top drawer, others won't. Goal for it. As you've worked your way through this chapter, you've begun to pay closer attention to your needs and you've identified some possible goals for your growth. You've also evaluated your goals and begun to sort them according to their importance and feasibility. Select, and write in your journal, a few goals to work on over the next weeks and months. Throw out those that are too far-fetched or out of reach for you at this time. Be practical. Narrow down what your next steps will be in your assertiveness journey. Remember that your choices are always tentative and subject to change with new circumstances and information. Stay your course, but remain flexible, making adjustments as needed. Setting goals for your own life can be an exciting process. As you take steps toward each goal, you'll find a genuine sense of accomplishment in your progress. Pat yourself on the back as you achieve each step. Use your journal regularly to keep track. Most important, let this be for you. Your goals needn't please anybody else. Pay careful attention to your own needs, play your own game. Chapter 8. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. It takes two to speak truth, one to speak and another to hear. Henry David Thoreau. Self-expression is a universal human need. The form it takes is unique to each of us, of course. In this chapter, we'll take a look at the several components of behavior that constitute our individual styles. While individual differences make the world go round, each of us can learn the skills necessary for good communication of an assertive message. I never know what to say. Many people view assertiveness as a verbal behavior, believing that they must have just the right words to handle a situation effectively. On the contrary, we've found that how you express an assertive message is a good deal more important than what you say. Although scripts of what to say when are popular with many assertiveness trainers, those have never been our style. We're primarily concerned with encouraging honesty and directness, and much of that message is communicated nonverbally. Participants in our groups and workshops have enjoyed watching us role-play a scene that makes this point clear. Bob acts as a dissatisfied customer who wishes to return a defective copy of everything you always wanted to know about assertiveness but were too timid to ask to the bookstore. Mike is the clerk. Using essentially the same words in each scenario, I bought this book here last week and discovered that 20 pages are missing. I'd like a good copy or my money back. Bob approaches Mike in 3 different ways. Non-assertive. Bob walks slowly and hesitantly to the counter. His eyes are downcast, he speaks just above a whisper, and his face looks as though it belongs on the cover of the book. He has a tight grip on the book and a, please don't hurt me, posture. Aggressive. Bob swaggers toward the counter, glares at Mike, and addresses him in a voice heard all over the store. Bob's posture and fist-like gestures are an obvious attempt to intimidate the clerk. Assertive. Bob walks up to the counter facing Mike. He stands relaxed and erect, smiles, and looks directly at Mike with a friendly expression. In a conversational volume and tone of voice, he states the message, gesturing to point out the flaw in the book. The 3 styles are exaggerated in this demonstration, of course, but the point is clear. The non-assertive, self-defeating style says to Mike that this customer is a pushover and the slightest resistance will cause him to give up and go away. The second approach may achieve the goal of refund or exchange, but the aggressive Bob will leave with Mike's hostility directed at his back. With the assertive approach, Bob gets what he came for, and Mike feels good about solving a problem for an appreciative customer. The components of assertive behavior. Systematic observations of assertive behavior have led behavioral scientists to conclude that there are several important components that contribute to an assertive act. The late Michael Serber, MD, a California psychiatrist who did extensive work with assertiveness training in the 1960s and 1970s, significantly influenced our thinking in this area. More recently, the work of psychologist Paul Ekman and his colleagues at the University of California, Berkeley, has confirmed much of what Serber and others posited long ago. The words may be even less important than the nonverbal components. It should be noted that most of the research in this field has been done with North Americans of European ancestry. Ethnic and cultural considerations are very important influences on the components described in this chapter. We urge you to reread the discussion of cultural factors in Chapter 4 and to be aware of cultural dimensions as you study these aspects of behavior. With that caveat in mind, let's examine the key components of assertive behavior in detail. You'll notice, as you read this chapter, that we really believe that it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Eye contact. There are several important components that contribute to an assertive act. One of the most obvious aspects of behavior when talking to another person is where you look. In general, if you look directly at the person as you speak, it helps to communicate your sincerity and to increase the directness of your message. If you look down or away much of the time, you present a lack of confidence or deference to the other person. If you stare too intently, the other person may feel an uncomfortable invasion. We do not suggest that you maximize eye contact. Continuously looking at someone can make the other person uncomfortable, is inappropriate and unnecessary, and may appear to be a game. Moreover, eye contact is a cultural variable. Many cultural groups limit the amount of eye contact that is acceptable, particularly between age groups or members of the opposite sex. Nevertheless, the importance of eye contact is obvious. A relaxed and steady gaze at the other, looking away occasionally as is comfortable, helps to make conversation more personal, to show interest in and respect for the other person, and to enhance the directness of your message. As is true of other behaviors, eye contact can be improved by making a conscious effort in small steps. Be aware of your eyes as you talk with others and attempt to gradually optimize your eye attention in conversation. Body posture. As you watch other people talking with each other, carefully observe how each is standing or sitting. You may be amazed by the number of people who talk with someone while their bodies are turned away from that person. People sitting side by side often turn only their heads toward each other while talking. Next time you are in that situation, notice how much more personal the conversation becomes with a slight turn of the shoulders and torso, say, 30 degrees, toward the other person. Standing or sitting may emphasize relative power in an encounter. A particularly evident power imbalance may be seen in the relationship between a tall adult and a small child. The adult who is thoughtful enough to bend or crouch to the child's height will find an observable difference in the quality of communication and usually a much more responsive child. In a situation in which you are called upon to stand up for yourself, it may be useful to do just that, stand up. An active and erect posture, while facing the other person directly, lends additional assertiveness to your message. A slumped, passive stance gives the other person an immediate advantage, as does any tendency on your part to lean back or move away. You'll recall Bob's first approach to the bookstore clerk earlier in this chapter. Distance, physical contact. An interesting aspect of cross-cultural research into nonverbal communication is that of distance versus closeness between people in conversation. As a very broad generalization, it has been said that, among European peoples, the farther north one goes, the farther apart individuals stand when engaged in conversation. In the United States, as in Europe, closeness seems to increase in warmer climates, but there are important exceptions, notably among ethnic subcultures that value closeness and contact differently. Closeness is, of course, not necessarily related to temperature. Cultural and social customs are products of very complex historical factors. In the Arab world, for example, it is customary for men to greet one another with a hug and kiss and to stand very close to one another. Interestingly, however, it would be considered extremely inappropriate for an Arab man to behave toward a woman in this way, yet that is quite common in the United States and Southern Europe. Distance from another person does have a considerable effect upon communication. Standing or sitting very close, or touching, suggests intimacy in a relationship, unless the people happen to be in a crowd or very cramped quarters. The typical discomfort of elevator passengers is a classic example of the difficulty we have dealing with closeness. Coming too close may offend the other person, make her or him defensive, or open the door to greater intimacy. It can be worthwhile to check out verbally how the other person feels about your closeness. Gestures. Accentuating your message with appropriate gestures can add emphasis, openness, and warmth. Bob Alberti traces his enthusiastic use of gestures in conversation to his Italian heritage. While gesturing is indeed a somewhat culturally related behavior, a relaxed use of gestures can add depth or power to your messages. Uninhibited movement can also suggest openness, self-confidence unless the gesturing is erratic and nervous, and spontaneity on the part of the speaker. Facial expression. Ever see someone trying to express anger while smiling or laughing? It just doesn't come across. Effective assertions require an expression that agrees with the message. An angry message is clearest when delivered with a straight, unsmiling countenance. A friendly communication should not be delivered with a dark frown. Let your face say the same thing your words are saying. Paul Ekman, author of Emotions Revealed, has published extensively on the subject of how important facial expression is to interpersonal communication. Dr. Ekman and his colleagues developed the Facial Action Coding System, a tool for actually measuring muscular movements in the face and relating those movements to emotions. Ekman's research shows that people can easily learn to read the subtle facial movements of others and thus be more sensitive to the emotions they're expressing. Moreover, you may be able to begin to control your own facial expressions so they more accurately reflect your feelings or, if you prefer, hide them. If you look at yourself in the mirror, you can learn a great deal about what your face says on your behalf. First, relax all the muscles of your face as much as you can. Let go of your expression, relax the muscles around your mouth, let your jaw go loose, and let your cheeks soften along with the wrinkles of your forehead and around your eyes. Pay careful attention to the relaxed, soft feelings. Now smile, bringing your mouth up as far as you can. Feel the tightness in your cheeks, around your eyes, and all the way up to your ears. Hold that smile, look at the expression in the mirror, and concentrate on the feelings of tightness. Now relax your face completely again. Notice the difference between the relaxed feelings and those of the tight smile, as well as the difference between the expressions you see in the mirror. You could try this with a series of selfies also. With greater awareness of how your facial muscles feel in various expressions and how you look when you smile and when you are relaxed, you can begin to control your facial expression more consciously and to make it congruent with what you are thinking, feeling, or saying. You may also develop a more natural, less plastic, smile for those times when you really want your happiness to show. Voice tone, inflection, and volume. The way we use our voices is a vital element in our communications. The same words spoken through clenched teeth in anger offer an entirely different message than when they are shouted with joy or whispered in fear. A level, well-modulated, conversational statement is convincing without being intimidating. A whispered monotone will seldom convince another person that you mean business, and a shouted epithet will bring defenses into the path of communication. Voice is one of the easiest behavioral components to gain accurate feedback on these days. Most everyone has easy access to a small voice recorder that can be used to try out different styles of your voice. Your smartphone can serve the purpose as well. You may wish to experiment with a conversational tone, an angry shouted blast, a caring message, and a persuasive argument. You may be surprised at how quiet your shouts, or at how loud your conversational tone is. Consider at least 3 dimensions of your voice. Tone, is it raspy, whiny, seductively soft, angry? Inflection, do you emphasize certain syllables, as in a question, or speak in a monotone or with sing-song effect? Volume, do you try to gain attention with a whisper or to overpower others with loudness, or is it very difficult for you to shout even when you want to? If you can control and use your voice effectively, you have acquired a powerful tool in your self-expression. Practice with a recorder, trying out different styles until you achieve a style you like. Allow time for changes to come and use the recording device regularly to check your progress. Fluency. Psychiatrist Michael Serber employed an exercise he called, Sell Me Something, in which he asked the client to talk persuasively about an object, such as a watch, for 30 seconds. For many people, it is very difficult to put together a string of words lasting 30 seconds. A smooth flow of speech is a valuable asset to get your point across in any type of conversation. It is not necessary to talk It is not necessary to talk rapidly for a long period, but if your speech is interrupted with long periods of hesitation, your listeners may get bored and will probably recognize that you are very unsure of yourself. Clear and slow comments are more easily understood and more powerful than rapid speech that is erratic and filled with long pauses and stammering. Once again, a recorder is a valuable tool. Use the device to practice by talking on a familiar subject for 30 seconds. Then listen to yourself, noticing pauses of 3 seconds or more and space fillers such as, and, you know. Repeat the same exercise, more slowly if necessary, trying to eliminate any significant pauses. Gradually increase the difficulty of the task by dealing with less familiar topics, trying to be persuasive, pretending to respond in an argument, or working with a friend to keep a genuine dialogue going. The program of Toastmasters International offers a unique opportunity for practice with feedback from a supportive audience. You may want to check out a branch in your community. See. Timing. In general, we urge spontaneity of expression as a goal. Nevertheless, while hesitation may diminish the effectiveness of your assertions, it is never too late to be assertive. Even though the ideal moment has passed, you will often find it worthwhile to go to the person at a later time and express your feelings. Psychologists have even developed special techniques to help individuals express strong emotions toward those who may have died, such as parents, before the feelings could be expressed. Spontaneous assertion will help keep your life clear and will help you to focus accurately on the feelings you have at the time. At times, however, it is necessary to choose an occasion to discuss a strong feeling. It is not a good idea to confront someone in front of others, for example, because extra defenses are sure to be present under those conditions. If you must, let it all hang out, find a private place and time to do so. Listening. This component is perhaps the most difficult both to describe and to change, yet it may well be the most important. Assertive listening involves an active commitment to the other person. It requires your full attention, yet it calls for no overt action on your part, although eye contact and certain gestures, such as nodding, are often appropriate. Listening demonstrates your respect for the other person. It is not a non-assertive act, rather, it requires that you avoid expressing yourself for a time, putting your own needs on hold as you listen. Listening is not simply the physical response of hearing sounds. Indeed, hearing-impaired people may be excellent listeners. Effective listening may involve giving feedback to the other person, so that it is clear that you understood what was said. Assertive listening requires at least these elements. Tuning into the other person by stopping other activities and ignoring other distractions, putting your own needs on hold, turning off the TV, computer, or iPod, and focusing your energy in his or her direction. Paying attention to the message by making eye contact if possible, nodding to show that you hear, and perhaps touching her or him. Actively attempting to understand before responding by asking for clarification if you need it, thinking about the underlying message, the feelings behind the words, and not interpreting or coming up with an answer. Offering sensitive and empathic feedback to show that you've heard and understood. Assertiveness includes respect for the rights and feelings of others. That means assertive receiving, sensitivity to others, as well as assertive sending. As with other components of assertive behavior, listening is a skill that can be learned. It is hard work, takes patience, and requires other people willing to work with you. Try to hook up with a practice partner, taking turns listening to each other and sharpening each other's listening skills. Practice accurate paraphrasing of each other's communications. It sounds as if you're saying, refining your paraphrases until the partner agrees you've got it right. It will strengthen your capacity to listen. Good listening will make all of your assertions more effective and will contribute much to the quality of your relationships. Thoughts. Another component of assertiveness that escapes direct observation is the thinking process. Attitudes, thoughts, and beliefs influence behavior. The late psychologist Albert Ellis of New York City, psychologist Donald Meichenbaum of Ontario, Canada, and psychiatrists Aaron Beck of Philadelphia and David Burns of the University of Pennsylvania have been particularly influential in focusing attention on the cognitive dimensions of behavior. Ellis, for example, reduced the process to a simple ABC progression. A. An event takes place. B. A person sees and interprets it internally. And C. The person reacts in some way. Part B, the perception and thought process, was often ignored in the past. Ellis simplifies it this way: what troubles us in life is not what happens to us, but how we react to what happens. The work of Meichenbaum, Beck, and Burns, together with that of others in the field of cognitive behavioral therapy, much of it built upon Ellis's early work, has produced a variety of specific procedures for developing assertive thinking. Thus you can now work on your thoughts as well as your eye contact, posture, and gestures. Thinking, of course, is arguably the most complex thing we humans do. As you might imagine, procedures for changing our thoughts and attitudes are very complex also. We will discuss this area more in Chapter 10, but for now, consider two aspects of your assertive thinking. 1. Your attitudes about whether it is a good idea in general for people to be assertive, and 2. Your thoughts about yourself when you are in a situation that calls for assertive action. Some people, for instance, think it is not a good idea for anybody to express himself or herself. And some think it's okay for others, but not for themselves. If either of these beliefs rings a bell with you, we want you to pay particular attention to Chapter 10 and work on thinking assertively. Persistence. As you may recall, we opened Chapter 5 with a brief story about the senior gleaners of Northern California and their founder, Homer Farner. Remember Farner's comment about being persistent in the face of rejection? I'm saying first, right out, when the crops grow, go out and see those people and persist. Because one turns you down, maybe he's got a good reason. Go on, go on, go on. Indeed, persistence, going on, is a key element in assertive self-expression. Not giving up, not saying, oh well, there's nothing I can do about it. Not concluding that you're not worth it. Because you are worth it, and there very likely is something you can do about it. Many of the procedures we've described in Your Perfect Right may be effective immediately. Speaking up clearly with good eye contact and posture appropriate to your message may get you what you're asking for: a raise, prompt service, a refund, less noise from the neighbors. But some situations require a longer-term effort. You may need to, as Mr. Farner put it, go on, go on, go on. That doesn't mean, incidentally, using some variation of the once popular, broken record, approach, in which you're advised simply to repeat the language of your request over and over. We don't consider that to be effective or appropriate. In fact, it's likely to get doors slammed in your face. When we encourage persistence, we mean something more akin to Alan Alda's advice to his daughter: be fair with others and keep after them until they're fair with you. Keep on keeping on. Dr. Dalton Keogh, of York University in Toronto, puts it this way in his video course Effective Communication: ask for the change you want. Acknowledge the other's response. Ask again. Acknowledge the other's truth: I understand how you could feel that way. Persistence. To get the city to fix that major pothole on your street may require repeated visits to the Public Works office, perhaps visits to the city manager, and maybe even an appearance before the city council. Persistence. To get your boss to address an issue of harassment or discriminatory compensation or an unsafe working environment may mean repeated visits to the HR department, speaking up at company meetings, private conversations in his office, or a complaint to your union representatives. Persistence. To get your lemon repaired properly or replaced may mean speaking with the dealership service manager, the general manager, the owner, the manufacturer's district representative, the manufacturer's public relations department, a vice president or the president of the company, or a public consumer advocate such as a state official or a TV, magazine, or newspaper personality. Persistence. To get the attention of the VA or Congress to improve the mental health care available to returning war veterans who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder may mean letters, petitions, visits to the district office, visits to Washington, even marches in the streets. Persistence. All of the components of assertive behavior described here, direct language, eye contact, posture, gestures, voice qualities, and others, apply to such situations, of course. The element of persistence simply means applying them again, and again, and again, as needed. Content. We save this obvious dimension of assertiveness for last to emphasize that although what you say is clearly important, it is often less important than most people generally believe. Many people hesitate because they don't know what to say. Others have found the practice of saying something about their feelings at the time to be a valuable step. We encourage honest and spontaneous expression. That means saying forcefully, "I'm really upset about what you just did," rather than, "You're an SOB." Verbal skills are usually developed to deal with such issues as saying no, standing up for rights, expressing warm and caring feelings, voicing anger, admitting anxiety, dealing with difficult people, responding to criticism, managing on-the-job relationships, setting limits, questioning authority, and persisting in the face of obstacles and other situations that place some emphasis on the content. That said, let's take a closer look at some effective ways to slice and dice the content of an assertive message. iMessages. We encourage you to express yourself and to take responsibility for your feelings, not to blame the other person for how you feel. Note the difference in the above example between, "I'm upset," and, "You're an SOB." It is not necessary to put the other person down, aggressive, in order to express your feeling assertive. Use iMessages to express your own feelings, rather than passing responsibility for how you feel to someone else. Your feelings are yours, and it's okay to say so. Expressing your feeling in the form of an iMessage was the brainchild of Dr. Thomas Gordon, a California psychologist and author of the bestseller Parent Effectiveness Training, which, incidentally, was published the same year as the first edition of Your Perfect Right, 1970. Dr. Gordon offered the idea in the context of parent-child communication, but it quickly found a home in all venues of interpersonal contact. The idea is simply to let the other person know how you are feeling about his or her behavior. The other interprets an iMessage as a statement of how you are feeling, not as an accusation or evaluation of her or him. Thus, once again, "I'm upset" is a clearer and more effective message than, "You're an SOB." Likewise, "I'm hurt" is more honest than, "You're unfair." Dr. Gordon, incidentally, didn't like the idea of expressing anger as an iMessage, believing that it contained a hidden you message, implicitly blaming the other person for your anger. We don't agree, but we do recognize the potential value of clarifying your statement by spelling it out more fully. "I'm upset about what you just did because I feel disrespected when I'm criticized in front of others." Categories. Psychologists Miles Cooley and James Hollinsworth developed another model for assertive statements. They grouped 7 elements into 3 general categories. Saying no or taking a stand includes stating your position, explaining your reason, and expressing understanding. Asking favors or asserting rights may be expressed by stating the problem, making a request, and getting clarification. Expressing feelings is accomplished by a statement of your emotions in a situation. You may find it valuable to practice each of these categories of statements with your practice partner or by speaking into a recorder. Syntonics. You can best achieve your goals in communication by being in syntony, harmony, with the other person linguistically. Linguist Dr. Suzette Haden Elgin wrote a popular series of books on syntonics, The Gentle Art of Verbal Self-Defense and its sequels, in which she compares effective interpersonal communication to tuning a musical instrument. Dr. Suzette Haden Elgin wrote a popular series of books on syntonics, The Gentle Art of Verbal Self-Defense and its sequels, in which she compares effective interpersonal communication to tuning a musical instrument. You have a standard to work toward, an electronic tuner, for instance, and you must gradually adjust your pitch to equal that of the standard. Likewise in communicating, your words and your nonverbal style can be fine-tuned until they match well with those of your listener. One of the techniques of syntonics involves adjusting to the other person's sensory preference, seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting. Thus, one person may say, "I see what you mean," while another means exactly the same thing when she says, "I hear you." You'll recognize the parallels here to our earlier discussion of so-called mirror neurons in the human brain. We are hardwired to mimic the feelings expressed by others as we interact. The idea is to help us learn to read our audiences and to communicate verbally and nonverbally in ways that will encourage them to respond positively to our messages. Used carefully and ethically, such procedures can be valuable tools in improved communication. Needless to say, there is plenty of room for abuse here. Target audience. One further word about content. Psychologist Donald Cheek, a neighbor and former university faculty colleague of ours, writing about assertiveness from an African-American perspective, points out the need to adapt assertiveness to your cultural setting. Particularly for minorities who may find themselves in survival situations, Cheek emphasizes that what you say must take into consideration to whom you are saying it. So language that would be interpreted as assertive within one's own subculture could easily be interpreted as aggressive by outsiders. The issue is remarkably complex, however. For example, cross-cultural research on facial expression, recall our earlier discussion of Paul Ekman's work, suggests that different aspects of expression are both universal and culture-specific. Individual differences may be greater than differences among cultural groups. We do not advise that you change yourself to adapt to whatever any given situation seems to invite. Nevertheless, all of us do deal with individuals differently, depending on our respective roles and the perceived power of others over us. We hope you can be yourself. Honesty remains the best overall guide. What you say must take into consideration to whom you are saying it. Assertiveness doesn't depend upon being highly verbal, but some folks are concerned about finding the right words. We don't recommend particular formulas or scripts for assertive expression because we'd rather see you use your own language. We hope it's clear by now that the style of your delivery is more important than the words anyway. It's surprising how often clients tell us very clearly how they feel about a particular situation and then ask, what shall I say to the person? Our answer is usually, say the same thing you just said to me. You very likely have the right words without knowing it. Don't misunderstand us here, content is not unimportant. It's just not usually the content that hangs people up. It is anxiety, lack of skills, or the belief that, I don't have the right to. You can imagine a wide variety of situations that show the importance of how you make yourself heard. The time you spend thinking about, just the right words, would be better spent making those assertions. The ultimate goal is to express yourself, honestly and as spontaneously as the situation allows, in a manner right for you. And finally, store this thought about content, it's not all about you. Showing interest in and concern for another person is as important as anything you can do to assert yourself. Check out your component competence. We hope this chapter has caused you to think more systematically about your own self-expression and to formulate some goals for your own work in assertiveness. To improve your familiarity with the components and to relate each one more directly to yourself, we suggest you take a few minutes right now to assess your own strengths with a short exercise. Create a chart for yourself, such as the one on the following pages. Or, if you prefer, you can simply photocopy ours. Now use the chart to rate yourself on each component by placing marks on the lines in accordance with how well satisfied you are with your skills in each area. You may, for example, feel okay about your level of eye contact and the appropriateness of your facial expression in most situations but feel your use of gestures and your voice needs some work. If you really have a way with words, you may consider your content to be excellent. Take enough time to reread the descriptions of the components in this chapter and to give yourself a thorough evaluation. Be sure to record this effort in your journal. Such a brief self-assessment is necessarily imprecise and requires you to make a global evaluation of your skills. Remember that assertiveness varies with situations and people. Nevertheless, we believe you will benefit by giving yourself this benchmark, then referring back to it in the weeks ahead, perhaps repeating the exercise and recording it in your journal from time to time, as you progress in developing greater skills in assertiveness. Nevertheless, we believe you will benefit by giving yourself this benchmark, then referring back to it in the weeks ahead, perhaps repeating the exercise and recording it in your journal from time to time, as you progress in developing greater skills in assertiveness. Chapter 9. Assertive Messages, 21st Century Style. The effect on language of the electronic age is obvious to us all, even though the process has only just begun, and its ultimate impact is as yet unimaginable. Lynn Truss. Almost all of the ideas we've discussed so far pretty much assume that you're face-to-face with the other person, spouses, family members, bosses, coworkers, neighbors, strangers, teachers, or sales clerks. We've emphasized the importance of nonverbal components of behavior, eye contact, posture, gestures, facial expression, and so on in getting your message across. Yet, the reality of connecting with others in the 21st century is that much of our contact is at a distance, not in person. Digital devices, cell phones, tablets, computers, iPads, Bluetooth, have virtually redefined the concept of interpersonal communication. We talk on a mobile phone, send emails and messages, comment, tweet, post photos, upload notes to interactive blogs. We're connected via Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, Pinterest, Tumblr, LinkedIn, Skype, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Google+, Periscope, Meerkat, Slack, FireChat, Emo, KakaoTalk, WeChat, and who knows what else by the time you read this. Much of this communication is private or anonymous, but a great deal is very open. We've come to enjoy telling the world about ourselves. And even when we are face-to-face, many of us avoid contact. Stroll downtown or through a shopping mall, walk across a contemporary college campus, sit for a while in a restaurant or in a library. Doesn't it seem that every other person is talking to someone somewhere else via cell phone or thumbing a text or tweet? Seems hardly anyone actually looks at the people around them or makes eye contact anymore. Indeed, there is evidence reported in the literature of psychology that suggests we may be losing some of our ability to communicate in person, at least in part due to our reliance on high-tech devices. It's common to see youngsters in the same room, talking to one another via text or some other online medium. What are the implications of assertiveness for the many ways people connect today? How will you send it? Actually, there seems to be no end to the variety of methods